Meet Ellen. She slams her brakes just in time. The coffee cup topples over into the passenger seat. The email still open on her phone and her hands are shaking. Just one more second and she would have crashed her car into the Lexus right in front of her. She exhales, heart racing, and mutters, "What am I doing?" Ellen is on her way to meet a client. It's 9:12 a.m., and she's half listening to a sales training podcast, checking her email, practicing a pricing objection, and wondering if her son brought the science project into school today. This is Ellen's life. She's a senior sales manager at a SaaS company in Illinois. Divorced, 2 kids, 2 calendars, and no pause button. Ellen's built a reputation for being the one who always comes through. She's always fixing what others miss. She's taking on more work. She says yes when everyone else is avoiding eye contact. But lately, it feels like all the pivots the organization is making feels like whiplash, not momentum. One day, it's a reorg. The next day, there are new targets they have to hit. Emails are tense, Slack channels feel like war zones, and it feels like she can't trust leadership anymore. Every day, she gets home feeling exhausted, not just tired, but drained. She eats dinner standing up. She won't even look at herself in her reflection, and she can't remember the last time she had a real laugh. Deep down, she knows that she's falling apart because she keeps trying to prove herself, and it feels like there's no end to it. Today, I'm speaking with Rashmi Airan, a globally recognized speaker, transformation coach, and founder of Rise Through It, a framework turning adversity into awareness, accountability, and integrity. And Rashmi doesn't just talk about leadership, she lived through a public fall from grace and had to rebuild herself from the inside out. And I'm excited to hear how Rashmi would advise someone like Ellen, someone who feels that she is disconnected from her values and she's drowning in expectations and she's desperate to find a path back to purpose, trust, and peace of mind. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. Rashmi, I am excited to dive into Ellen's story, but I think I'm more excited to dive into your story because I learned a little bit about you, your background, and there's one thing about you that I thought was interesting is that your family immigrated from India. And that suggests that you had some conditioning from a young age, I assume, just like I did, as I had a father who immigrated from overseas, that you had to overcome in life. What was some of that conditioning, some of the things that you, I guess, had instilled in you from a very young age that you then later had to work through?
I always say, when I was growing up with parents both who immigrated in 1970 from India, I always felt this almost self-imposed duty to achieve, to make my family proud, to achieve, get and believe, achieve the American dream that my parents sacrificed everything to come here for, right? And so my mom was 18 and she left everybody and everything she knew to come here with a man that she had just met and then married less than 30 days before. And my dad left everything, his 11 siblings and family to come here. So I, as the oldest of 3 sisters, absolutely felt this pressure and expectation. And it's not that anybody ever said it to me. It was just innate. And so I think many of us as children of immigrants and high achievers and type A personalities, all of my self-worth and self-love and self-esteem was all rooted in those things. So what grades did I get? What schools I went to? What awards did I win? How much money I made? Because that's what I thought defined me. That's, the better I did, the higher I graduated, the more awards I won. It felt like the more love and praise I received. It took me a long time to understand that even though, yes, I was getting those accolades and my parents were super happy, that didn't define who I was. And that did not define why people loved me and believed in me and were proud of me. So that lesson, which I learned 9 years ago, was so key to my growth. And I really believe has led me to be who I am today and now do the work I do, which is to impact others in a positive way. So I define myself completely differently now.
I can relate so much to it. I
Yeah.
grew up where I was the only boy, two
Mm.
older sisters. So the pressure was, you got to do everything for us. Like, we're molding you to be the person who cares for this entire family. And I still hear it from my mother to this day, Rashmi. I mean, my mother tells me, she's like, when am I going to be able to retire and you're going to take care of everything for me?
Oh God, that's a lot of pressure. My God. Yeah,
But
that's a
what
lot
you
of pressure.
said, right, is what I had to also do, which is redefine how I then measure my own self-worth. And I would say, though, at the early in life, it led me down some tendencies of people pleasing, seeking approval. So I guess, what were some of the things that you experienced early on in life that were some of the struggles? Like, how did that surface, in other words, in some ways that you now look back and say, wow, I can't believe I was falling into that pattern over and over again?
Well, look, I think people pleasing is something that's very common for those of us that feel these expectations. I would say uh, I always felt like I had to know it all, and I never wanted to ask for help. I To me, the word vulnerability was absolutely a sign of weakness. And so I never let on. So I was completely armored up, right? And to give Brene Brown the credit, it really took me going through my journey, reading her books, watching her TED Talks, and going deep within myself by journaling and writing in a gratitude journal and meditating and praying and talking to friends to understand that armor was really blocking me from who I am meant to be. So for me, taking off the armor was one of the things that I've had to do to get to where I am today. Um, we don't even realize it. I always say that we create this self-imposed prison that we put ourselves in, and this with glass walls. We don't know what's there. We just are in this fast-paced course of life doing things, and we put up walls around us, and we create this facade and persona of who we are. Uh, our society is very unforgiving in many, many ways until we open up and realize actually people are very forgiving when we open ourselves up. So I'm sure we'll dive in.
And it has to come from within us. It's not ever going to come from the outside. If we're waiting for it to come from the outside, we're going to be waiting a long time. Now, you said
Totally.
something happened for you that really woke you up. Could you share what that was?
Well, let's talk about my story. So I was, like I said, by all accounts, I was doing all the right things. I was basically following my plan. And my plan was, if I just go to all the best schools, get the grades, get the awards, if I just do all these things, right? Well, I'll just follow a plan, then I'm going to achieve, and then I can make money, and that my parents will be proud, and life's great. Of course, that's not how life works. I really believe that the universal truth is we will all struggle. It just looks differently for all of us. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill, graduated top of my class, highest honors. I went on to Wall Street and worked in investment banking at Morgan Stanley. And then I went on to Columbia Law School. Again, was that good girl, graduated with all the highest honors, and called Kent Scholar at Columbia. By way of San Francisco, I ended up back in Miami, and I started practicing law. I worked for a litigation boutique firm. Then I worked for the government. I was a county attorney. And then in 2004, I started my own practice. I started it just before I got pregnant, which is obviously good timing. And as the kids were born, so I had two kids back to back in 2004 and 2006, early 2006. And so as the kids were little, I felt all this pressure to make the money and to provide for my children. And to give some context, my husband at the time was a firefighter. I'm now divorced, but so at the time I was the major breadwinner. I absolutely felt the pressure to provide. And, sometimes parenting, we confuse providing with parenting. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was really struggling, I think, with cash flow and hustling, and I was missing dinners, and I was going to every networking event, and selling my services at the gym, and I had a little real estate legal transactional practice. And so in 2007, I had an opportunity to meet a real estate developer. And you're younger than me, but if you take yourself back to 2007, right? Like the market was crazy. South Florida was insane in real estate. And so when I got this opportunity to meet a real estate developer, I thought, oh, well, if I can get this one big client, that's the answer to all of these problems. Yeah, I'm not going to struggle, right? Like that was that was what was going on inside. So I had to get this client. Like I was so hungry. I would say I had blinders on. I just was so focused on that one goal, achieving the goal, right? Getting to the next thing, which was getting the client.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked in, I met him. He started talking about these creative transactions that he had been already doing with another big law firm. And I didn't ask any questions. I didn't ask for help. I didn't ask for a second opinion. By the way, I'm surrounded by attorneys. Okay. My parents are attorneys. Most of my friends are attorneys, or many of them. Many of my mentors are attorneys. I could have gone to any number of people to ask for a second opinion, but I didn't. I was just so focused on getting this client, right? Because I thought, God, if I can get this one big client, that means volume business, which means financial stability, which means I can be home for dinner and spend time with my kids. So within 2 weeks, I started working and I had my first closing requests, and it was like a steamroll. It was like, came through, and I never took the time or made the time to do any due diligence. Like I said, to ask for help. And I really just, in the moment, started justifying and rationalizing and making assumptions and making it okay. And what happens is when we're in that moment of feeling all that like pressure and not being present because we're just thinking about all the other things we've got to do, we go down bad roads. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but I started working with this guy and his company. And in 15 months, I had about 200 closings, transactions. And then I stopped working with him. All the condo units sold in his development. And I moved on and I then merged my practice with my dad's. To make a very long story short, 7 years later, I got indicted for bank fraud. And it was like a twilight zone. Really, I thought everything in my life was like, oh my God, I've disgraced my parents. I've disgraced my children. I've disgraced I sit on a lot of boards in Miami. So I thought, oh my God, it's like all of these nonprofits that I'm involved in. And it took me a long time to understand. And really, I went through all the discovery, and I had this great attorney who helped me understand that not doing something is still doing something wrong. And that I knew enough. And just knowing this one little thing was enough.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we create these situations and circumstances where we want to believe it's okay, or we convince ourselves that everybody else is doing it, so it must be okay.
Right.
The fact is it doesn't matter. Like in my case, between 2007 and 8 and 9, when all this was happening, there were probably 500 other attorneys doing something kind of similar, in some creative way or the other. But the fact that they weren't getting or didn't get indicted, it doesn't matter. Like the point is, I'm getting indicted. I've got to deal with it. What am I going to do about it? So I ended up pleading guilty, and I got sentenced to a year. In the process of preparing for my sentencing, I called almost 200 people, friends from elementary school, college, law school, Morgan Stanley, my kids' friends' parents, my kids' teachers. Like I called everybody. I called politicians in Miami and managing partners of law firms in Miami. I mean, I called anybody and everybody that I thought could talk to who I was as a human being and my character. And the judge ended up getting almost 200 letters of support. And it was like I got eulogized before I died. And actually, I have it right here. I'll show you. Not to break, but this is.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So
for those who are not seeing it on video, it's a huge packet.
It's a binder like 2 inches thick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's goodness. I had spent my whole life believing that people loved me for the achievement.
Yeah.
And what this taught me was, first of all, I got being eulogized as a living human being and getting to read stories that people were sharing about me of how I had impacted and influenced and touched their lives in such a positive way
Yeah.
when I was 12 or when I was 23 or when, that in and of itself taught me that people are very forgiving of our humanity. And I think we condition and tell ourselves that, like I said earlier, right? Like I thought I had to be this person to get love, but it's actually not that, right? One of my friends said, Rashmi, you stood naked and exposed for the world to judge you, and we did. And you let us see ourselves in you. And then we were able to teach our children that we're just all flawed humans, right? Because all of these kids, hung out at my house and partied with my kids and really had a lot of respect for me. So that whole experience really led me to understand that, like, this is just a moment in my life. It doesn't define who I am. Something's going to happen. And I believe this is not happening to me. It's happening for me. So when I walked into prison, I really had surrendered. I had really felt this. I found peace. I had to let go of my ego because, like, listen, we are all trapped in ego and we're all stuck in thinking, what will people say? What will people think? Who will love me after this? So when I let go of that, I found actually everybody still loves me and people still believe in me. They all showed up on my sentencing hearing. The judge sentenced me to a year. And the time I spent in prison was very much intentional. So I was very aware of how I was spending my time. Look, I was very blessed. I only was there. I was only sentenced to a year. So I had a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people there that are there for much, much longer. So I did have the privilege and gift of that. But I really used my time to go inwards. So I read a ton. I wrote a lot. We all had jobs. I was at a camp, so we all had jobs. So my first job was I was the trash girl, which was very humbling. I had to take the trash from all the housing units and dump it into the trash compactor bag by bag, and the bags would bust, and I'd have to pick up the bags. I had gloves, thank God. But it was an incredibly humbling experience because when I first got the job, I was like, oh no, what are people going to say? Let me do the trash like after everyone's like almost gone upstairs. I don't want them to see me doing the trash. And the truth was is nobody cared. Like nobody cared what I was doing. They were just all figuring out themselves out. So, it was like the part of the lesson of understanding that we're all just human beings. Nobody really cares, right? Everyone's here to love on each other if we give them the chance. My second job was I was a math teacher. So that was where I ended up. And I taught math and English and Spanish. I taught fractions. That's where we were in the curriculum. It was very empowering and very rewarding. And then since I came home, which was in 2016, I can't believe it's been 9 years now. I really have redefined success, right? Like, so success used to mean the achievements and the grades and the money. And now the way I, define success for me every night is, have I impacted one person today? And so now how many people I touch and inspire is how I define myself and define success. And so my entire legacy is to help people understand that no matter what we're going through, we can rise through it.
Yeah. Well, it's a powerful story, and it also makes me question whether you would have ever come to this realization if this hadn't happened.
100%. People always say, like, would you go back and take it, change it so it wouldn't happen? And my answer always is, if I could go back, I would go back and make better decisions, because I own the fact that I took part and played a role in the 2009 crisis, right? So I would like to take that back. And if my taking it back would change the ultimate crisis and the crash, I would do that. But I wouldn't take away the prison experience. And look, we can have all sorts of conversations about criminal justice reform. But for me, that experience led me to a place of being such a better human today. And so I'm so grateful that I, had that experience. I don't wish it on anybody else, but for me, it was incredibly impactful in what I learned and how I'm able to understand the world and how I'm able to relate to others and touch people's lives now.
Well, I also think it's a evidence of your own ability to look at a difficult situation like that and see how it can help you to grow and learn. And I think that that's just something special about you, that you were able to like get something so positive out of all of that. And then I know it led to you coming up with some ways in which you can share these messages, and you do that of course through your keynotes now, and you have something called your rise process, and I was curious to ask you about that. Tell me about what that is, and I'm sure that some of your own story, right, is what led to you putting it together this way. So tell me about it.
Okay, so we'll start with the fact that Rashmi, my name, actually means the light from the sunrise. So it's so interesting because it was sort of like it's been within me all along. I just had to tap into it. So RISE stands for reframe, identify, surrender, and evolve. And so what I believe is that society tells us rise above, move on, keep going, push harder. To me, all of that is an escape, because if you just rise above whatever you're going through, you're not learning what you're meant to learn through the struggle. So I believe we go through struggle because we're all meant to go through many different struggles in our lives, because we're supposed to learn something. We're supposed to grow from it. And sometimes, even in the hardest of things, right? Like grief, we've lost a loved one. Even in that, there is a lesson. And I myself have lost, two very, very close people to me in life, my sister and the love of my life. And so I've gone through it. And I can appreciate when people are going through it and in that moment of grief, because it's so hard to understand, why is this happening, right? So it doesn't mean that we don't cry and grieve, but it does mean that it takes some time to get to where I'm at. But so I don't think you just rise above. I think the way and to go through any struggle is to rise by going through it. So I say you have to rise through it. So the rise process is, first you have to reframe. So actually reframe the failure, the challenge, the struggle, whatever you're going through, into from negative to positive. Like actually reframe it into something that's positive. And it's hard. What I believe is that you have to allow yourself to feel that pain in your bones. Like actually know what it feels like, embrace it entirely. And that means sometimes having difficult conversations with yourself and owning it, which is what happened with me. So then once you reframe it from something negative to something positive, then you can identify. And when I say identify, I believe we have to identify the people in our lives. I call them my constellation of stars. I've reframed what I was going through. Now, who is in my life that's going to lift me up and ground me? Meaning, who's going to hold up a mirror and say, I'm here to lift you up, but this is what you need to see about yourself, right? We have a lot of people in our lives that are yes people and, want to be around us when things are great, or, want to pass judgment on us when things are bad. But who are the people in our lives that are there, A, unconditionally, and B, are there to tell you the truth when you need to hear it? Because I think we all need those people in our lives to help us go through these hard moments. S is for surrender. So surrender is truly letting go of ego, fear, control, and judgment. So, like I said earlier, right? Ego is a trap. We all worry so much about our image and what people are thinking and saying and believing about us. And the truth is nobody cares. So we just have to let go of that ego. And by the way, this is like an everyday struggle for all of us. And for me, like every day I have to remind myself, nobody cares. Right?
Nobody
Like
cares. I
nobody
love it.
cares.
I love that this
It's
is
just a
a theme
story.
of the conversation. It's so good because you brought it up a few times, but you're absolutely right. Like no one really
Right.
is
Like,
thinking about us, you know?
no, they're thinking about themselves. So if we can just let go of our ego, then, so
Yeah.
I always tell people, like, I am a control freak. Like, just ask my ex-husband. I am a control freak. But when we let go of control, which I had to do, I went through this phase of my life where I had no control. I didn't know where I was going to sleep, what I was going to eat, who I was going to be around, what I was going to be doing. I mean, I had some level of control, but not really when it came down to it. And so letting go of control, as hard as it is a huge part of our ability to surrender. And we're oftentimes so stuck in trying to control a person, a thing, an outcome. And when we can allow ourselves to let go of it, because it really is just a choice to let go. Once you let
Yeah.
go of that, it allows us to like really move forward with conviction and courage. And then I think we all pass judgment on ourselves and we pass judgment on others, whether we want to admit it or not. And I had very distinct moments in my experience where I recognized, I was passing judgment on myself. So like I had to get to a point where I could forgive myself, right? This was really hard because I've always been so hard on myself. And so the moment I was able to forgive myself, it looked like me looking in the mirror and saying, I forgive you. Like literally looking at myself and saying, I forgive you, which took months, by the way, of a lot of crying, a lot of praying, a lot of talking to friends to forgive myself. And then I recognized there was a moment in prison. So there's a story where I was taken from federal camp to a county jail because I was asked to testify in this other case, and there's no federal prison in Tampa. So as I'm sitting in this county jail, well, actually, as I'm being taken to this county jail, I'm like passing judgment on the women I'm about to go be with. This is 5 months in. I've already been in prison for 5 months, but I'm already telling myself, I don't belong there. Like I'm educated, I'm an attorney. These are county jail people, different demographic. I don't belong with them. I'm better than they are. Then I spent 23 days with these women, cooking, eating, praying, crying, sleeping. And I realized, how dare I pass judgment on these women? Because there, but for the grace of God, there go I. And they're just like me. Like I believe we're just drops from the same ocean. We're all humans in this experience of life struggling. So though, letting go of judgment is a really, really, really hard thing for us to do. And it starts because none of us actually acknowledge that we're passing judgment on other people. Like we don't want to believe that we're that person that's passing judgment, but we all are passing judgment on other people. It's just it's part of how society has trained us. I
It's
tell
part of
my
being
kids,
human.
it is.
It's part of being human. It's happening whether we're conscious of it or not. It's also
Yeah.
something that's so wired into us because it's a survival mechanism to be able to immediately make an impression as to whether someone's a threat or is not. Is this someone who's actually a foe or is this an ally? Right. So it's so heavily wired in us. And I do think there is so much value. And I think this gets overlooked. And I'm so glad we're talking about it because it gets overlooked that just being able to be really mindful of the judgments that we have of others is the first and most important step, of course, to be able to then suspend that judgment, to be able to not be so disconnected from other people, because then it just creates this resentment and frustration and within ourselves.
Well, yeah, because we start to think poorly about ourselves. Like, how could I be passing judgment on the person versus this is part of the human existence. Let me just be intentional about not passing judgment. Right. So it's not, we can't, because what happens is in the acknowledgement of passing judgment on others, we start passing judgment on ourselves. That's part of it. Like,
and then we're judging ourselves for judging people.
Yeah,
and then we're judging ourselves
like a never ending. So letting go letting go just takes care of all of it. You just let go of it all.
Right. Just drop it all. Yeah.
So reframe, identify, surrender. And then the final one is evolve. And I believe that the only way to grow, the only way to become a better version of ourselves is by, going through this process of rising through it, reframing, identifying, surrendering. And then evolve. For me, evolution happens for us in all different ways. In my experience, I found that I did not have presence in my moments. You're a parent, you get it, right? Like I was so stuck in the, like, what's the next goal? What's the next client? What else can I get? That even when my kids were little and I was physically present, I wasn't actually present. And there's a lot of talk about mindfulness and right. But like, okay, you can like give a lot of lip service and meditation and mindfulness, but it is actively and being aware in the moment at every moment to be present and not trying to send that last email out as your kids are trying to spend time with you. Right. So like that to me, and I had this like moment of understanding when my kids came to visit me in prison, which they came a few times. They were 9 and 10. Like literally they came and we just would play board games and they would sit on my lap and we would talk and I would hear about their day or what's going on in school or what tests they have coming up or, and so like all of those things that we take for granted in our daily lives or, driving them, picking them up from school, driving them to football practice, soccer practice, whatever. Like those moments, so being present, and it's not just with our kids, but that's a great example, right? It's being present with our spouses or our friends, being present at work instead of like being at work and thinking of what's happening like in other ways. So presence. The second thing for me was gratitude. And there's so many studies that have been done about like when you write in a gratitude journal, what it does for your emotional well-being and reducing stress and your ability to be more resilient and get through these hard moments. And so when I was in prison, I had a friend send me a gratitude journal. And so I would write in this gratitude journal. Literally, it would be the first thing I would do when I woke up. It sat on my ledge. I was on the top bunk, and the ledge that separated the cubes was like right next to my bed, my mattress. So I would keep it on my ledge. And every morning, as soon as the guards would walk by at 5:45, I would turn on my nightlight that I had clipped to the back, and I would pull over this. I would just grab my gratitude journal. Before I even got down, I would write in my gratitude journal. It was like, what are the 3 things you're grateful for today? What are 3 things you're hoping to do today? What are 3 affirmations you're going to make today? And then the last thing I would do before I would go to sleep, literally before lights out, is I would write again in the gratitude journal. What are 3 things that happened today that I'm grateful for? What are 3 things I wish I could have done better today? And that mental process in the hardest of places, in the hardest of moments away from my children, my ability to find gratitude really helped me change my mindset. And when we're going through these moments in our lives where it feels like everything is crashing down look, I have a daughter that suffers from mental health challenges. She has a lot of anxiety and depression. And my sister passed away 6 years ago from mental health issues. So I am no stranger to the challenges that many of us feel. I do believe that writing in a gratitude journal helps. I tell my daughter this all the time, and she tries to journal as much as possible. I do think that writing in a gratitude journal, for me in that moment, helped me continue to find my peace. So that helped me become a better version of myself every day.
It reminds me very much of A Man's Search for Meaning with Viktor Frankl, who was in a concentration camp, and his ability to still see the positive in things and to have some gratitude even in those environments. Because the one thing that no matter what, right, he says it in the book, they could take away all of my freedoms, they can take away, but they can't take away my thoughts. They can't, my power to think and what I focus my attention on, that's something I only have power over. And then one of the aspects of Rise that I think is very applicable to Ellen's story is the desire to control, the attachment, if you will, to wanting to control everything, because she's overwhelming herself, taking on everything, saying yes to everything. But I think that's because of the fact that she has this innate drive to want to be in control of everything in her work and her personal life, and it's overwhelming her, right? So how would you help someone through that? As someone who has that high achieving, high performance mindset, they want to control everything, how would you help them to learn how to let go?
So I do this exercise with my audiences and in workshops where I'll say, take a piece of paper and write down one thing that you're trying to control right now. So Jay, write down, what is one thing you're trying to control? Do it.
You want me to think of something?
Yes,
genuinely?
think of something. Yes, generally. Yeah. Write it down. And I would ask Ellen to write down something on a piece of paper. What's one thing you're trying to control? Okay, got it?
I got something. I wrote it down.
Okay, let me see your piece of paper. Hold it up for me.
I would hold it up. I don't know if you can read my terrible handwriting.
Yeah, okay. So now you wrote it digitally. Okay. Yeah. So now I want you to erase it. Or if you have a piece of paper, if you're listening and you're doing this, rip up the piece of paper.
Okay, I could erase it.
Yep. And letting go as simple as that. It is making a choice to let go. And we think it's not that easy, but it actually is. We can really just decide, okay, I can't control the outcome of, let's say, a legal situation. You can do, doesn't mean you don't do everything you can in your power to do all the things that you have to do. But the actual controlling of the outcome is oftentimes not in our power. And that is something we can let go of.
And what I think is also important is, you said it before, you have to sit with the uncomfortable feeling that will then come from that letting go process, which is like, in Ellen's case, it's like, okay, you're going to let go of having to reply to every email within seconds, right? because
Yeah.
maybe that's what she's doing, right? She's on her phone
Yeah.
while she's driving, right? It's
I
going
know
to be
this feeling.
uncomfortable, right?
I know this feeling. Yes.
Right. It's going to be
Even
uncomfortable.
today. I mean, look, I'm still dealing with it, right? Like it's a never ending ongoing thing. Yeah.
Right. But you have to learn how to sit with the discomfort of it, right? Which is to be able to say, okay, my mind is pulling me towards something. There's this energy that I feel to respond to that person, to try and be as on top of everything in my life. But if I just learn how to be present, yeah, I'm gonna feel that pull, but I'm just gonna sit with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think just the acknowledgement of the discomfort is one of my friends is just releasing a book. It's called Uncomfortable Either Way. And it's so true that sometimes it's the understanding that whichever way we choose to go, it's still going to be uncomfortable. If we choose to stay in status quo, at some point that's going to be uncomfortable. If we choose to change and shift, that's also going to be uncomfortable because we're not used to it. And listen, change is scary. The world right now, we are all going through so much uncertainty in this world in so many different aspects, right? I mean, we can point to the market, to the environment, to the climate, to, politics in the world, education. There's so many areas where all of us are struggling with uncertainty, and there's a lot of fear associated with that. And so when we're going through that, uncertainty, for us to find the ability to let go of the fear and of that uncertainty allows us to actually achieve more. It allows us to become better versions of ourselves. It allows us to innovate and collaborate with our teams better. Like all of those things come from letting go, from actually just releasing.
And what I also find too is like if you play it out in your mind, and there's a bit of stoicism in here, which is to play out the worst case scenario of, okay, let's say I stop replying to emails immediately. Okay, then what's gonna happen? Like keep going. Oh well, then what would happen? Then what would happen? And you play it out like to your point.
That's the
Sure, there's
worst
gonna be
case scenario, right?
yeah, there's gonna be
Yeah.
some discomfort, but no one's gonna die. Like your mind is so primed to think that it is actually life or
Or
death,
you're
that
gonna
it's
lose
actually
like
trending.
not
Yeah.
even you don't have to talk about death. Let's talk about like very normal, rational ways of thinking. We think to ourselves, if I don't respond to this client right away, they're going to think I'm not a good. In this case, I was an attorney. I'm not a good attorney. Okay, if I'm not a good attorney, he thinks that, then maybe he's going to fire me. He's going to find another attorney. If that happens, I'm going to lose income. If that happens, how am I going to? Then I have to find. So like,
Right.
there's this road we can take that we can rationally understand that even if that happens,
Mhm.
I will be okay.
Right. You will.
Will find another client. Something else will come down the road. Like that is one of the things I've really understood is, and every day I'm still dealing with this, right? I'm reminding myself of this, but I really believe that spiritually, what's meant for me, no one can take from me. So if another speaker gets a speaking engagement that I was on a hold for, let's say with a speaker agent, that means that I wasn't meant to get that speaking engagement this year. Maybe I'll get it next year or the year after, and vice versa, right? So when we have that level of peace and surrender of understanding, like what's meant for me will always be there for me. And as entrepreneurs, as business people, we often struggle with running around the race course faster and faster to get to our goals, to get to the thing, because we think that if we don't do it, somebody else will take it from us. And I've had to, by the way, Jay, I do this every day. I have to keep telling myself this, right? Like I have to keep reminding myself is it, I have to work as hard as I can. Believe me, I probably work too much. My kids are like, Mom, go out, go do something fun, go on a date. Like I don't do any of that. I just work all the time. But like, we have to do all the things we have to work hard and use our skills to, set ourselves up to achieve our goals. But what we can't do, we have to try not to do is let ourselves think detrimentally about where like what's happening in our lives because we don't achieve what we want to achieve, or in that moment we don't get the gig, or we don't get the client, we don't get the promotion, whatever it is. I think that's the ongoing battle for most of us, is that understanding. And so when I go through this in my head, which again is a daily process, because by the way, the RISE process is like I'm applying the RISE process every day, iteratively, many, many, many times a day. So it's constantly, I'm constantly reframing it in my mind. I'm like, okay, so if I didn't get that gig, what's the worst that can happen? All right. That means that day's open inventory for another event. Or that means somebody else, that one of my friends got it, and I'm really happy for that person. And then I lean on my family and lean on my friends to remind me, like, I'm so great at what I do. Like, like you need people to remind you, or maybe you didn't pitch that correctly, or maybe you didn't customize that keynote description enough, or, something like that. And then I just have to let go of the fact that, like, all right, I'm going to let go of the fact that I'm not going to get that gig. I'm going to let go of the control that I didn't have. Because you really, in my business, I don't have control over whether an event planner or a meeting planner is going to hire me. What I have control over is how am I performing on stage? Am I impacting the audience in a positive way and giving them really good value? Am I creating, relationships in a way that's powerful and impactful? And what's my legacy going to be? Like, you can control certain things.
Yeah.
And then
well, it's the word that comes to my mind as you're describing this is trust.
Yeah.
Trusting, right? Trusting that what's meant for me is meant for me. What's not meant for me is not meant for me.
Yeah.
And I feel like every time we're in a state of resistance to it, which is saying, I should have gotten this, or why didn't I get that? We're lacking trust in that moment, right? We're saying that things are not going according to the plan, right? Whatever that plan is, who made this plan, right? We attempt to say we control the plan. But you said it earlier, and I'm with you. There is very little control that we have. And that's everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're in corporate, whatever it is. There are so many factors to consider as to what will lead to a certain outcome. To suggest that you even have the faculty to control the outcome is in itself illusory.
100%.
Right?
And we're sort of pulling this like wool over our eyes to think that we actually have control, right?
Right.
So,
it's just it's a strange belief that we have. And it's like, I feel like what's happening, I'm with you, right? A work in progress, everybody. Like, I don't got it all figured out. I'm just trying my best day in and day out, just like everybody else is. But what I find that really helps me is to keep reminding myself of the fact that this is not within my control anyway. If I attempt to say that I can control it, that's like saying I can control the weather. How I can't control the weather. Sometimes the weather works out in my favor, other times it doesn't. But that was what it was supposed to be anyway, and it's happening as it's intended to happen, and I have to let go, like you were saying. I have to surrender to it. So, Rashmi, at the end of these conversations, I always want to create a scenario where you get to meet the person in this story. So in this case, it was Ellen, and so much of what Ellen is working through is related to the things that you yourself have been overcoming, and now you share on stage with people and you add a ton of value. So let's say she was in the audience, she heard you speak, and you know how after a keynote, you're off stage, you're now chatting with some of the people who were there in the audience. Let's say Ellen was one of those people. She comes up to you, Rashmi. She tells you her story. She tells you how she's struggling. She's telling you how she's overwhelmed. She puts everything on her own shoulders, and it's really leading to a lot of effects on her mental space, her emotional well-being. And you have a chance to ask her a question that would then evoke a bit of a shift in perspective here to get her to think differently. What would you ask her, Rashmi, to get her to think differently?
Yeah, I would probably ask her two questions. I would say, can you tell me what's something that right now you're going through that you could try to reframe? Like, what's one of the struggles? Let's talk about it. Whatever it could be. I'm trying to get this promotion. I'm not getting that promotion. Or actually, in her case, I think she's an entrepreneur. So she's trying to land a client. She's an entrepreneur, right?
No, she's a sales manager. Yeah.
A sales manager. Okay. So let's say
entrepreneurial for sure.
Entrepreneurial. Yeah. So let's say she's trying to land a new client, right? And she's trying to control that. So like, what's one thing that she could reframe? Well, if I don't get this one client, that means I can get another client. Another client will come. I just have to keep reminding myself. I always say struggle is not a detour, it's a doorway. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean I'm being pushed off track. It just means there's a different doorway I'm going to walk through. So I would ask her, what's one thing you can reframe? And then can you try to let go of that thing you're trying to control? Like, can you make that choice to let go of that? Because reframe it and then realize that you're trying to control the outcome of, and you, in your mind, you're going through all of these things. Like, what if this doesn't happen? What if you can just let go of what that effects of what it would be, how would that show up for you? How would what kind of peace would that bring you? That's probably what I would do. And I'd probably give her a really big hug. That's how I would feel it. I'm there with her. I've been there. I'm still there. I don't claim to be cured. I just claim to like be learning and growing every single day still. That's just where I sit. That's the space I'm in.
I love the fact that you mentioned you'd give her a big hug, because I think that's a part of it, right? Right. It's just to say like, yes, we could give advice, we can talk through things. But sometimes the best thing we could do when someone's going through it is just be a human and be together, give somebody that hug, give them that acknowledgement. But I also think that, go ahead.
I want to say that I spent the majority of my life believing that I had to do everything alone, that I had to go it alone, right? So even when I was going through all of this, I mean, I was already separated, I had my kids, but I was still like in a sense, my whole life thinking I had to go it alone. Like, I never wanted to ask for help, whatever. And through this process, what I recognized is every step of this journey, the people in my life stood up for me. The people in my life were there for me, unconditionally loving me no matter what. And what I understood about this is that we rise through it ourselves, whatever we're going through, but we don't rise through it alone. We have to each individually rise through our own struggles. But when we begin to talk about them and share them courageously and be more vulnerable, and all of us start recognizing and understanding that we're all in this together, we all are rising through our own struggles. So we don't rise alone, we actually rise together. So the more we all keep rising through our moments and sharing it, we all collectively rise together. And that was a huge learning for me because, like I showed you, the almost 200 letters that I could have never expected. And I would never have realized or understood it, but for what I went through. So I do believe that like that aspect of humanity and finding togetherness and community and connection with others is as much a part of our rising as the process. Right.
Yeah.
So giving hugs to people and high-fiving each other in my speeches, there's a moment where I have people stand up and we do a Bollywood dance lesson because it's related to a story that actually happened in prison. Like all of these things I do because to remind all of us that we're all in this together. None of us are alone.
Yeah.
We're all in community doing it together.
I love it. Well, yeah. Rashmi, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad we did this.
Yay. And I'm so glad we finally got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone listening, I highly recommend going to Rashmi's website. On there, you'll find a lot of information about Rashmi's social media accounts, but some of the keynotes that you do, the workshops that you do. It's rashmiairan.com. That's RashmiAiran.com. We'll have that in the show notes for everybody as well. But Rashmi, thank you again for taking time out of your day, for sharing your story, and for providing us with such incredible value in this conversation. I appreciate it.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much, Jay.
What an incredible story that Rashmi shared with us about what she had to experience, having to go through being in prison, having to go through that kind of shame and guilt, and to come out on the other side with the wisdom that she has now and that she shares with the world is remarkable. And I'll do my best to synthesize it down into our 3 insights and our 3 actionable takeaways. So the first insight is the 4 steps of the RISE process. That was to reframe, identify, surrender, and evolve. And when it comes to reframe, it's being able to look at things from different angles, recognize that we can learn from any experience. And then when we identify what is really gripping us. What are we trying to hold on to? And then S is to surrender control. And then lastly, it is to evolve, to keep growing, to keep learning. And that's unique for everyone. The second insight, I think, is one that put a big smile on my face, even listening back. And that is, nobody cares. Nobody cares. We place such heavy value on the judgments of others and what others think, and then we judge ourselves for judging others, and we fall into this crazy spiral. But we have to learn how to let go of ego, let go of control, and just drop everything, because in the end, people are thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about you. Third insight, what's meant for me will always be there for me. What a great statement. If something didn't happen for you, it wasn't meant for you. It was meant for someone else. everything that does happen was meant for you. The things that are happening in your life, the success, the achievements, even some of the missteps, the perceived failures, all of that is meant for you. And if you operate from that mindset, wow, what a much more peaceful way to live. Then we have our actionable takeaways. First of 3, be present for the important moments. So often we're taking for granted the little things like taking our kids to school and celebrating with loved ones. Those are the moments to savor. Those are the moments that you don't want to be caught thinking about the past or the future. You want to be there. You want to be fully present. You want to be grateful for those moments. Savor them. It's something you can practice in the moments. Recognize that this is a moment that you don't want to be distracted, that you want to be fully there for. The second actionable takeaway, sit with the discomfort. Acknowledge it when it comes. When you are looking to let go of controlling something, it's going to be uncomfortable. You have to sit with it. And then one thing Rashmi brought up I thought was really valuable, that is, discomfort is inevitable. You're going to feel discomfort one way or another at some point. So why not just choose to be intentional about what it is that you're going to be sitting with in terms of discomfort and just go through it, because you're going to have to go through it either way. And then the third actionable takeaway, what's one thing that you can let go of? What's one thing? So you brought up that exercise of writing it down on a piece of paper and just ripping it up. It's a decision. Make that decision right now. Think of something that you need to let go of control of and just choose. Make that decision now. I'm going to let go of this. I'm going to make that decision to not let this be something that I am continuing to reach for and trying to have full control over. I'm going to let go, and just notice how you feel when you do. Join us on Friday. I am excited to share with you my top 5 books that have changed my life. Last Friday, I went through 10 through 6, and I summarize a little bit about each one of those books. So go back and listen if you want to hear some more recommendations. But this Friday, I'm going to give you my top 5. These are the best. These are the books that have had the greatest impact on me, that I revisit constantly. So you don't want to miss that on Friday. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.